Hi guys. In part one, we were down at one of my favourite sunset locations, Las Salinas on Lanzarote, where I run the workshop. And we were talking about using the geometry of the salt pans to lead the viewer on a journey through the picture and off to the sunset behind the old abandoned windmills. This time I said I'd come back and I'd just talk you through developing those raw files. But before we do, I just want to talk to you for a moment about raw files. I get a lot of comments and messages from people saying, I just want to get it right in the camera. How do I do that? Firstly, you must get it right in the camera. It is critically important to get it right in the camera because you have to get the data. Doing post-production on your raw files is not about mending something that went wrong. It is about putting your stamp onto the image. It is about taking the viewer on a journey. What is it about that place that caught your eye? What is it that sparked your imagination? What is it that you were looking at that you got so excited about you wanted to take a photo of it and share it with other people? You do that when you do your post-production. Of course you can shoot JPEG, but the camera doesn't know any of those things, and so therefore it can only put its pre-programmed interpretation onto the image when it does the post-production for you. It only knows there is this much green, this much red, this much yellow, and it knows there is this much brightness and this much darkness, and it just makes a bland all over kind of a representation. My 7 Steps to Perfect Pictures course is about this interpretation. Sure, we're going to be talking about the knobs and sliders and controls because you've got to know how to drive the car before you can, you've got to know what the controls are before you can drive the car. But we're also going to be spending a lot of time talking about what questions do you need to ask yourself, powerful questions, so that you have a goal when you begin and you know where you're going. You're not just pushing sliders up and down and moving them around in the hopes that something happens. So let's just go have a little look at some of those pictures from Lanzarote. Well, one in particular actually, and let's just have a look at different ways to interpret it. So here is our basic raw file. That is the raw file, and you look at the histogram. Yeah, there's a bit of clipping at either end, a bit in the darkness, but I promise you there is plenty of data there. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But this interpretation, so here is one development of it, and I'd say that's pretty much what I saw and how I felt. It was kind of these lines that I was interested in, and we had a nice bit of sunset. I love the old abandoned windmills. This is kind of what I was feeling, what I was looking at, and this is what I had in my head at the time of shooting, because actually post-production really begins at the time of capture. You need to have a goal in mind and then shoot it accordingly. That's for a completely different training program which I've actually been working on for the last 3 years. Hopefully it'll be done next year. But that is one interpretation. But let's say you actually were more excited by the sky and you really wanted to maximize that because it was a very dramatic sunset. Well, here we go. Here's a different interpretation. We've got different colors going on. We have a different look to it. Move that out of the way for you. You see, we've kind of changed the feeling of the image. We're now going far more into the realm of sunset rather than geometric shapes going to a sunset. But then you could also, if you were really excited about the sunset, you could then also focus more on the little light pools. You see these little highlights going on here in around the salt? Well, look, how about if you were to just shift the emphasis from sunset to salt, sunset, and back more towards the salt pans. You see, these are very subtle changes, but they're changing the mood and the feel of that image. And that is your job as the photographer. This is making your handprint. If you shot film, remember hand printing? This is where you make your handprint. Let's have a little go at this. Where would we begin? Well, first off, as I said, the histogram, yeah, there's lots of data in there, and this is a histogram of the JPEG representation, not of the raw file. So let's see what we can do with it. Let's just start, whoops, did the wrong one. I apologize. Highlights. Let's start bringing some of them back. Now look at that. Look, here we go. They're coming back in, and look at that. That's looking quite nice. Now we could keep going, but I'm not very keen on going too far. I'm not a go too far sort of a boy, really. Right, stop that train of thought. Let's lift those highlights. Let's just ease those up. Let's start getting some data. Let's start getting some detail. Whoa, look at that puppy ramp up. Did you just see that histogram? Watch, do it again. Look at that. Right. We've got loads of information now in the shadow areas. You can see the difference going on, and I would at this point probably just boost the overall exposure just a bit. You know, make small changes if you can. Don't go making wild, crazy, sweeping changes. At least that's my philosophy. I'm not saying it's right, it's just my philosophy. If we have a quick little look at before and after, there we go, you see. Now at this stage you could of course just sort of do the usual stuff. We can do our whites. I don't mind a bit of burnout in the highlights, particularly when shooting into the sun, because if you look at the sun it burns out. Eyes and cameras see light differently. Some people say that burnt highlights are bad, wicked and wrong and you should go to jail for a minimum of 10 years. I say go in the garden, go look at the sun with your eyes. You will see that it is burnt out, and don't do it for too long, your retinas will be burnt out. But if you don't believe me that cameras see things differently, go and get someone to stand in front of a window and take a picture of them. In the photo there'll be a silhouette. In reality, with your eyes, you'll be able to see them and the garden. Cameras see things differently. Blacks. Right, you can see there's a few little blacks going on there. I'm pressing the Alt key, by the way, and holding the black slider. You can see there's a few little blacks there. I don't want all that, that's horrible. I think it was somewhere around there. That's plenty for what we're doing. Now, of course, the quick way to develop this would be just kind of pushing a bit of clarity, chucking a load of vibrance to help the less saturated tones, and then chucking a load of saturation overall, and you could sort of go, well, there we go, I've done it. Yeah, it's all right, but it doesn't have the mood or the feeling of this, does it? So where does that mood and feeling come from? How do you put that interpretation into it? Well, as I'm always saying, you have to put in the work. Effort in is results out. Let's have a quick go at it. Right, let's just take away that nastiness I put in there. I do want a little bit of clarity, but not much. I'm just going to go to somewhere around the 10 mark. It's a very subtle thing. I don't know if you could even see it changing. If you go like this, you can see what clarity does, but you don't want to do that. Subtlety, small layers of subtlety built up a little at a time. They are what make for really beautiful pictures, and that is how you get your mood, your dream, your vision into them. I am going to put some vibrance in to help those less saturated colours, and I'm going to put a bit of overall saturation in too, but not too much, because we can always come back and do some more work on it later. I just flick that. Right, where next? Well, next I want to do something with the sky. I'm going to start working on the sky. Again, there are many different ways to select and work on the sky, from brushes and grads and all sorts of things. I'm just going to do it my way. I'm not saying this is the right way, because I know I will get lots of comments saying, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? It's like going on a little drive, you know, going on a journey. I rode my motorbike through France recently, and you know, I went down one way and back a different way. No reason, it's just the way I'm going. Okay, so if you press the O key, you can see the overlay, and if you want to change the color of that, it's adjustment overlay mask. You can change that in there. I'm using a green one. So you can see where the mask is going, and you can also see that it's going to be covering over windmills and headland and stuff like that. I don't really want it to do that. So I'm going to remove some of this mask. I'm going to whip over to a brush, press the Alt key so I have a negative brush. I want to have auto mask enabled because I want Lightroom to find the edges of things. And I'm just going to zoom in a little. Here we go. Make my brush a bit bigger, right square bracket. I want a fairly hard edge, but I think I'm going to give it a bit more feather than that. Here we go. So long as you've got the little minus symbol on the bit you want to remove, nothing happens. Minus on the little headland, and look, we just work through like this and we start to remove the parts that we don't want. Now there's no point in you watching me go through this because it is going to take a little while. I'm going to speed this step up. That is pretty good. So we've got the sky all nicely selected. Let's get rid of our mask again and do a little bit of work on it. First thing I'm going to do is add in a little bit of dehaze. Look, you see, as we do this, we're bringing in some more detail into the sky. I don't want to go mad with this. Dehaze is a little bit dangerous. Don't go bonkers. Somewhere around there, I think, is probably good enough for where we're going there. I might just drop the exposure just to sneeze. This is a painterly thing. You just kind of do a few brush strokes, see where you end up, see what happens. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Right, what next? Let's have a little look at the foreground. I want to just kind of help these little light pools out a bit. And you see along these rocks there's these little sparkly bits. Well, all of that can be helped out too, because these little highlights, in reality, they were much stronger to my eye. But mostly what we need to do are these little bright areas in the salt, which is so faint here and looks so much nicer in reality. We need to help those out. I don't know if you can see, there's a very soft edge of a shadow going on just here. There's another little highlight, it's just sneaking through in the back there. These are all things we need to help, to get them going, help them pop. So I'm going back to a brush, and I'm just going to start brushing them in a bit. Let's increase the size of the brush. Again, we can always go back and change things. I don't want an auto mask going on there. What do I want to add in? I don't really want too much exposure, maybe just an eensy bit. I mean, really a lot less than half the stop. I do want to increase highlights because it's just the highlights and it's the whites. It's only the sparkles really that I want to work on. So I'm actually going to reduce the flow. We're going to take that down to around halfway, about 50%, so I can build it up a stroke at a time. And I don't want to use a mask. I can see there's a little highlight area here, so let's just start gently painting it in. Look, you see there's a little bit going on around there. These little subtle changes. And can you see along this edge here, going a bit closer, if you can see along here, that bit there is subtly darker to this area here. That is a very soft shadow, and I just want to help it. So let's take our feather down a bit, brush down a bit, and I just want to kind of paint in along the edge of that little shadow, because it's just going to help it come to life a bit. Here we go, look. This is a very painterly, as I say, thing. Do the same over here on this one. We're just going to run that back and forth across here, just gently easing up that highlight area there, and we're just going to paint it in across this pool like that. There we go, you see, we're just lifting that nicely. Now here there's a little runnel of light coming through here, so let's just reduce the brush size a bit, and we're just going to gently work and paint that in, because there's a slight directional shadow happening there. There it is in there. Nice, good. This one here, again, there's a tiny bit going on here. I'm not going to go bonkers with it because it only needs the subtlest of approaches. These little highlights running through the middle of the picture, they're a little more interesting, and I want to work on those. Now this is a very small brush. You're probably thinking, really? Are you mad? No, I'm not. This makes all the difference doing this. Let's make the brush a bit bigger. Just paint in along the front of that slightly larger shadow here. There we go. You just blend this stuff together. Make the brush down a bit. I just want to bring in a bit into this corner here. And the beauty of doing it at a low flow rate is that you can build this up. You can just do it a bit at a time. Look, you see we're just bringing in those little bits of light. Make that a tiny bit bigger and just help that shadow by just brightening the salt in front of it. Look at that. Look at that. That is just going to make so much difference. It's going to look so much nicer. Here we go. So we're kind of in here somewhere like that. Do the same along the back of this one here. Just paint that up a little. Like that, and do the same over here. Just put a little bit of light into here. There we go. We're not changing the light, we're just changing the way that we see the light that was there. It's the same as that thing when somebody is in front of the window. Right, let's just help that little piece of light coming through there, because it's going to make a lot of, there we go, look at that. Bring the brush back up. Left and right square bracket, by the way. That is how you just ease this brush up and down without having to fiddle about moving down to the panel at the bottom right over here. There we go. We're getting there. We're getting there. Next, let's just, there isn't so much of a highlight coming through here, so I'm only going to give it one little stroke through there. I don't want any more than that, but there is a little bit of a shadow across there. So it's not as strong, but it's there. There we go. Don't try and enhance, don't try and put things in where they're not, because if you do that it will look weird. Look, over this side there's hardly any shadow effect whatsoever, so I'm only going to give it one very gentle little brush around into this corner. That's about it, because I don't want to spoil it. Here I'd say we almost no shadows at all. The light was very soft. If you saw part one, you'll remember me going, oh no, we've lost the light again. If the shadows were there stronger, it would look probably a little more interesting. But I still love it. I really do. What's going on in here? Yeah, you see there's a little bit of shadow there, but not here. It's a very soft thing. So let's make this brush quite a bit bigger and just help it in. There we go. Look, just across there. That's all. That's all it needs, no more. Here we go. So we've now lifted up those highlights a bit. We go into the history panel here and I go back to where I started doing brush strokes. Look, there's a lot of brush strokes. If I pop back to here, watch. Look at that. If I bring them back in again, look, you see we've just, look at those little subtle little changes. They've just helped. And something else I think will just help. I want to put a little bit of highlight. You see there's some highlights along this edge of this bit of salt here. I just want to paint a little bit in here too, not too much, just paint a little bit in there. There we go, that's probably all it needs. We're just helping it. Okay, great. So we've now got our foreground kind of starting to pop a little bit more. But what about these highlights running along here on these little bits of stone? I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use a new brush to do it, because then we can adjust things separately and independently. Let's just kind of work this in. I'm going to make the highlights brighter and the whites brighter here, because we're working on black. Can we even see a difference on that? Let's see what we need. So it's so subtle you can hardly see it. Whites. It is doing it, but it's so minute. So I'm actually going to ease in a teensy bit. So we don't want too much exposure because that look horrid, but I'm going to lift the exposure a bit, drop the blacks a bit and push those whites. It is making a difference, but it's not much. Look, you see how subtle that is, but it is there. It is nonetheless there. Right, I'm just going to paint in a little bit of this across here too, because I just want to help these little brighter patches on that salt through here. There we go, that's nice. Yeah, we're looking good. We're starting to rock and roll, baby. Take the brush down a bit and just run a bit through here too. And across that one. There are some highlights here, but not many. Whoa, careful. You see the brush was too big and I ended up going onto the salt. Don't want to do that because that will look weird. There we go, much nicer. There we go, it's just poured a little lift to that edge. What happens if I put clarity into it? Will that help? Not really. It's a really tough call, this, to try and get a bit more life into there, but it's worked. There we go, we're better. Push those whites, yeah. Okay, good. Now what? I want to just also help these shadows a little bit more into the salt here. I'm going to go and get a grad filter, and I'm going to whop a grad going on up from the bottom here. I'm going to run that up through here. Somewhere to around there. This wants to be quite a hard grad, so we just grab the edges, just bring that in up to about there, I reckon. Reset the effect because I don't want that stuff going on. What I do want to do is just up the clarity a bit. Here we go. Look, you see, as I up the clarity a bit, we're now helping those little pulls. Again, don't go too far, only going a little way. 11, there we have it. That has made a difference. Cool. Next job, I just want to pop down into my HSL hue saturation luminance. Let's just ease the orange saturation up a tiny bit and the yellow. I don't think there are any reds in there. There's a couple, but I'm not keen on them, so let's just, can you see them up here in the top of the screen? I don't really want to start putting reds in weird places, so you must look out for these things. A little bit more saturation in the blues and the aquas, only the tiniest bit. Okay, I'm going to have a quick look in split toning. Again, this may or may not make a difference, but I just want to have a little play. Let's just see if we can get a little bit more of the gold into the highlight. So if I up the saturation of the highlight areas, you can see those are the colours that are kind of there, and it's a bit bonkers. But let's just up it a bit. And I just want to move this slightly more into the yellow end because it wasn't that red. I want to ease it into the yellowy, there it is. It's somewhere around there. Back a bit. There. That's quite nice. We've got some nice little orangey bits coming into the highlights. The shadows, they're not bad. I think I'm just going to make a max. Let's just take these up. About the same, 54, yep. It just keeps the colour temperature working throughout. There we go. I don't know if you can see, that's a very subtle shift, and the video may or may not be picking this up. Something to remember when you're going to do this, calibrate your monitor. You don't calibrate your monitor, you're hiding to nothing, because what you're seeing is not going to be what anyone else is going to see. We are starting to pop with this. Let's just come out of there, come out of those tools, have a before and after. There we go. You see, we're getting quite a nice feel. This is kind of coming close to where I was with it. I just feel that that sky possibly needs a little bit more purpley lilac in it. Let's just see what happens if I just take that split tone up this way towards those. Too much blue. It's not really working. No, I'm going to go back where I was, and I think I'm going to try another way to just help that sky out. Where are we? Somewhere around there, 50 odd. Might take the saturation down a sneeze. Don't want it too saturated. Okay, good. Let's go back to our grad filter in the sky, the great grad filter in the sky. I'm just going to use the down arrow key to just sneak an teensy bit of magenta into it. That, I think, is going to work. Sorry, that's blue. What are you doing, idiot Browne? Idiot Browne! Right, a little bit of magenta into that sky. And it's a very subtle thing. You may not be seeing it very clearly, but I would say that's probably helped a lot. I might even just sneak in an incy bit of saturation. Good. Now, all these little tiny adjustments are what is making the difference. But here's one more. I want to bring in this highlight. I want to kind of create something on the water. I like the sparkles there, and I want to bring light towards us. So again, brush. One of my favorite tools is a brush. Let's just reset it, and I just want to up the exposure an incy bit. Look, 0.3 of a stop. That's all I want. And all I want to do, let's just zoom in, I think, and take the brush up a bit bigger, a little bit of feather. And I'm going to leave the flow there because I just want to see these sparkles. I just want to paint them in just a bit at a time. And that's a little better. I'm just helping them. Look, see, if you go too far, they look horrible. Just a little bit there, and maybe a little bit of highlight. This is where your post-production starts to work. Lightroom's doing a few weird things at the moment. It's been having a hammering all afternoon. That's better. We've just helped that. Where are we? You see that little highlight on the water? Look, up here. If I just bring that back in, there it is. It's just helping. The next thing I want to do with that highlight is I also want to help. You can see the light, there is a light path, and it's coming this way. That's why there's not so much shadow there, and those subtle shadows are in here. I want to bring those in this direction. I want to help the viewer on the journey through this picture from where I was standing. We're leading them through these lines. Now let's help lead them with the light that was there. It was so gentle, I just want to help it. I'm going to start about here with a brush that's fairly, just give it 100% flow in this case. I'm going to start here. This is a little trick for you. Let's have an overlay so you can see what I'm going to do. I am going to click here. Now I want my light path coming towards me. I'm stood here. We all have our own light path. I'm stood here in the middle. So I'm going to bring it in here. Let's just whap that up. Real big. There we go. And shift click. There we go. We've now got a nice light path. Take that off. Brush back down. And have a little look. What do we got? We're lifting the highlights. We're just going to ease up. Oof, look at that, look, 0.45 of a stop, 0.45 of a stop, viewers. Let's just ease up that little bit of clarity in there. That's looking nice. Now in that very path I'm also going to add a little bit of yellow, because look, that's the colour of the light. That's just take that back a bit, but now we've got the colour of the light matching the sky. That's nice, that's nice. We've got that beautiful little light path. Right, we're nearly there. We've almost done. The last thing I want to do is, there's a bit of a lack of contrast going on in the windmills and these stone walls. So I'm going to take another brush, take that down a bit, and I'm just very gently going to do a little bit of detail work in here, reset that effect. What I'm going to do is reduce, I don't know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to up the contrast a little. Let's just see what happens if I just paint that with a bit more contrast. Let's just see what happens. I think it probably actually needs a bit more black. If I go too low, that's too much, but just a little more black, only a little bit more. I like using the down arrow key and the up and down arrow key. Let's just increase the whites. Come on, Lightroom, you're struggling, baby. Here we go. We're just upping it a bit, like that. Yep. See, it's all blurry. There we go, it's loaded in. That is a little nicer. It's just kind of, I just paint that in. I don't know if you can see it. It's just helping that along a bit. Let's take those blacks down a sneezy bit more. That's better. Take the highlights up. That's better. Let's put a bit more contrast and punch into this stonework. Just brush that in there. It's all subtle stuff, very subtle stuff, but it all, bit at a time. You just build these things up, little piece at a time. Just like you did in a darkroom, you would have been working with spatulas, you know, with little bits of cardboard stuck on the end, dodging and burning different areas. And just kind of, I'm just seeing what looks like a dust spot there, but it might be a cloud. I'm going to pretend it's a cloud. Right, let's have a little look in here. Again, I want to do a little bit of work on this area. I'm just going to auto mask it, and so I don't have to faff about finding the edges too much. There we go. That's just again helping the contrast in there. Let's just see what happens if we just brighten the highlights a bit. That's better. That's better. See, if I go too far, it looks horrible. But let's just about there and back a bit. Come on, Lightroom, you can do it. There we are, I think. Pop that into here. So I just want to help it along in this area too. And I think we are pretty much done. The last thing we're going to look at, come on Lightroom, catch up. The last thing I just want to look at is my sharpening. I just want to see what's going on with the sharpening, I think. Click the wrong thing, go down to detail. Let's have a look in the shadow area, see what we've got. There's not very much in the way of grain there. I'm down to 200 ISO, and before you ask, that is the lowest ISO that the XT1 has. I'm going to just whiz across, have a look at the windmills, and I'm just going to, a little bit of a halo going on there where I masked it possibly a bit too slow, a bit too quickly. I was doing it to save some time. Let's just ease in a bit more sharpening. That's probably plenty. Now let's mask it. Masking. We want to remove sharpening from the areas that we don't need it. So Alt key, move the slider. The areas that are white have got sharpening applied to them. We only want it coming around the edges of things. We don't need sharpening anywhere else because it will just put a little bit of noise into there. There, I think we have our shot. Yeah, I like it. Now look, this is a slightly different interpretation again. You see we have a different feel to it. We've got more of a journey going on in this one. It's a different feeling, it's a different emotion. And that's really what I wanted to show you guys in this video, is that you are the person in control. And that is what the 7 steps to perfect pictures is all about. Learning the questions that you need to ask in order to get the results that you want, and I will take you on that journey. Hope this video has been of use to you. If it has, please click in a few likes, share it, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear what you have to say about it in the comments. You may have seen a link right at the beginning, a little thing up here that just said if you want to watch it on the site, there's usually an article and some other stuff that goes with it there too. So thanks guys, see you next time.